time for a fun announcement. We are going to do a meme/art/Photoshop contest with my dog. In the description you will find a link to a load of pictures you can use to make some cool stuff. I will pick a winner after a week, and the winner will get a major shout out in a video and on my Twitter and Instagram. You enter by posting the picture on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook and using the hashtags WilyArt and Chucktastic. So be sure to check it out. A summary of all of this will be in the description. Now let's get to the video. The Zelda series has always been about Link and Zelda taking on evil like Ganondorf. But what are they fighting for? Well, the legendary Triforce, an artifact of unlimited power. But what would happen if it never existed? In what ways would the world be different? Well, it's time to find out. Alright, let's start with taking a look at how the Triforce came into existence. Well, the Triforce is a sacred relic left behind by the golden goddesses Din, Nehru and Faeror, once they finished creating the realm which came to be known as Hyrule. And the goddess Hylia was tasked with the protection of this world and the Triforce. The relic consists of 3 separate triangles: the Triforce of Power, Triforce of Courage, and the Triforce of Wisdom. This is the ultimate source of power in the Zelda series, and serves as a balance for the 3 forces known as Power, Wisdom, and Courage. It has the ability to grant the wish of those who obtain it, regardless of whether the person's intentions are good or evil. So as you could have guessed, the relic had a huge influence on the world of Hyrule. And all of this started in the very first game of the timeline. During the beginning of times, Demise and his hordes launched an attack to the surface in an attempt to get their hands on the Triforce. Thanks to this, Hylia gathered the surviving humans on a piece of land and sent it to the heavens. In order to keep the Triforce from falling into the hands of Demise, she also sent this to the sky. So this is already an instant where the Triforce is the main cause of the entire problem. But what would happen if there was no Triforce? Well, Demise only came to the land of Hyrule to get the Triforce. So if there was no relic to obtain, then he wouldn't even launch an attack.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
And because of this, Ganondorf is also non-existent, since he came into the world because of the curse Demise put on Link and Zelda. Now that I mentioned them, they wouldn't be any different from the normal Hylians, since they are wielders of the Triforce, but the Triforce isn't around anymore. Zelda would most likely not even exist, since she never had to sacrifice herself when she was still Hylia. So the goddess would still be alive, and Link could still be her chosen hero. But this time, he doesn't have the power of his Triforce piece. Also, the humans would be extremely technologically advanced, since they already had robots back then. And if Demise never came, they could have just continued expanding without a problem. Who knows what they could do in that time. But I have to say, the list goes on for ages. The Triforce is extremely important for the events of the first game. So let's take a little bit of a different scenario. What if it disappeared after the timeline split happened? Where Link either defeated Ganondorf, prevented the fight, or even lost. In what ways would the timelines be different? Well, Ganondorf, Zelda and Link would still be around, since the entire event with Demise happened. Because when he was defeated, he made a claim that his hatred would not end, but would be reborn in the coming ages. This started the entire endless cycle of Link and Zelda's fight with Ganondorf. Well, let's start with the downfall timeline. In this alternate world, Link was defeated and evil won. Ganondorf got all the pieces of the Triforce and was sealed away within the sacred realm by the sages. So if the Triforce would disappear, Ganon would be stuck in the sacred realm forever, since he wouldn't have the power to escape or cause any harm. And even if he would escape, then he wouldn't be able to do any damage, since Link even won from him when he had the full Triforce in A Link to the Past. So without any extra powers at all, he would be a piece of cake. Removing the Triforce from the downfall timeline would actually immediately solve all their problems. Now on to the child timeline. Here Link goes back in time and warns Zelda about Ganondorf's plans. Thanks to this, the fight was prevented, but Ganondorf did get his hands on the Triforce of Power. He was sentenced to execution by the sages, and they managed to severely wound him by impaling him with a light sword. But the Triforce of Power activated at that moment, and thus, they could not kill him. Knowing no better solution, the sages opened the gate to the Twilight Realm and sent Ganondorf through it. Now, if he didn't have the Triforce of Power during the execution, he would have never survived. He would have been dead for sure. And if he lost it after he got sealed in the Twilight Realm, then he would most likely be stuck there, since he wouldn't be able to convince Zend of his godly status. So we start to see a pattern here. Ganondorf gets stuck each time. Without the Triforce, his plans have a small chance of actually succeeding. And there's also another question you might have. Will Ganondorf still attack Hyrule and cause trouble, even if there is no Triforce? Well, yes, he's the incarnation of an evil demon after all, and there are more powerful artifacts in the Zelda universe, like the Dark Trident, so he could always go after those. Now, the last timeline was completely changed thanks to the Triforce. I'm talking about the adult timeline. Here, Link was sent back to his own time, and Ganondorf is sealed within the Sacred Realm by the 7 sages. But with Link sent back in time, the world is left without a hero, and when Ganondorf returned, the gods had to flood the land in order to save it. So if the Triforce wasn't around at that point, the world would never have been flooded, since they could easily take on Ganondorf without the Triforce of Power. This would also mean that the Zora never evolved into the Rito, and the same goes for the Kokiri and the Koroks. And New Hyrule? That would have never happened. Everyone would most likely still live in the original Hyrule. And this would also mean that they are more advanced than they were in the Wind Waker, since they don't have to rebuild or anything. Maybe they would be on par with Hyrule in Twilight Princess, where they have a huge castle and town around it. And who knows what might have happened to the Kokiri and the Zora. So as you can see, in a lot of the timelines, Ganondorf's plans would be ruined. And in the adult timeline, everything would be completely different. But there are even more events that wouldn't have happened if it didn't exist. For example, the Interloper War, Hyrulean Civil War, and even villains like Vati. So the only thing the Triforce does is create chaos and trouble. It would be a blessing if it disappeared. However, there's a problem with this. The world will end without it. We have seen this in an alternate universe called Lorule. It possessed its own version of the Sacred Realm and its own incarnation of the Triforce. But one day, they decided to destroy the Triforce rather than seal it, in order to stop the fighting over the artifact. However, without its Triforce, Lorule slowly began to crumble. As the generations went by, Lorule fell further and further into disrepair and edged closer to its doom. So the world would end if it was ever destroyed. The Triforce is Hyrule's biggest blessing, as well as its biggest curse. It's like a double-edged sword. It made so many horrible things possible, but it's also the source of life. Without it, the world would most likely come to an end. But by destroying it, you would have prevented almost every war, the constant attacks of evil creatures like Ganondorf, and you would have even saved the original version of Hyrule in the adult timeline. So could they somehow create another power source that would be less damaging for the world? Well, most likely not, since the Triforce is essentially an endless source, which is almost impossible to create. Besides that, Lorule didn't end up solving their problems in all those years. The land was essentially doomed. But there are 2 possible options. First one, what if Hylia sacrificed herself in order to keep the world intact? Like I said before, if there was no Triforce at the beginning of the timeline, then she would still be alive. And maybe she's powerful enough to keep everything up and running. But we can't be sure about this, since we don't know how strong she actually is. Another option is getting another god to power the world. Just look at Termina, which is another alternate universe. They have the 4 giants and are doing fine. We even see Triforce marks in the stone tower, but we haven't heard anyone mention it. Maybe that's what the Terminians did. Dump the Triforce and go for the 4 giants. So these are some of the possible options of what could have happened if there was no Triforce. But of course, there are a lot more ways how this could have played out. It's such an important artifact for the Zelda universe. So yeah, a lot is possible. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to check out the contest. Everything is in the description. And if you want to watch more videos, click the annotations on the screen right now. And if you want to give a thumbs up, then do it. Thumbs down, then do it. Hate comments, then do it. Do it.